take notes too.
Well, have you read some things? I noticed you have some focus issues there.
Yeah, I've read a little bit of that.
I read some of the...
I haven't read a lot on this. I mean, I've been reading so much on so many other things that I haven't. I mean, I've started getting some of the publications, and I'm going to go downstairs right now. And
there is a short history of the Institute, which
I don't have that one. I need to get that. Yeah.
How it started and what its main features have been. Well, I'm pretty stumped here as to how to start. If we start with the Institute and how it came into being, maybe that's a reasonable beginning, and then we can turn off in different directions.
Yeah.
This Institute grew out of President Johnson's war on poverty idea, which in turn grew out of, I think, the Council of Economic Advisors.
Yeah.
Where I happened to be as a staff member during this time. This was, in retrospect, certainly a time of great confidence that we had learned how to manage the economy and prevent the big depressions and the great inflations, and to achieve stability and growth and national goals of related nature. It was, in retrospect, a period of overconfidence.
Right.
A simplification, perhaps, of problems and the difficulties ahead. In that spirit, President Johnson picked up on an idea that Kennedy had kicked around a while, which was that we should do something about poverty in the United States at the national level. There were two big strands of thought that developed within the presidential circle at about that time, after the announcement of the war on poverty, I think it's right to say, or at least after the beginning of thinking about it in the presidential circle. One was what I would call economics ideas. Economists thought that poverty was best attacked by achieving high employment and maintaining it, which was the Keynesian goal, I guess you could say, and also of improving the productivity of low-income workers, and thirdly, by having some kind of increasing the productivity by such things as training and retraining, relocating people, cutting back on discrimination in employment, so on. A whole bunch of labor market measures coupled with investment, you might say, in human beings. Well, the other part of the economics program would be to take hold of various social transfers or social welfare programs and expand them to include the poor. The theory was Michael Harrington's theory that, or the observation, insight, was that a lot of the social welfare programs of the 1930s failed to really include the poor. The best example being unemployment compensation. It was a good idea, but it didn't help the people.
Particularly agricultural, where in the South, I know, for instance, domestic and agricultural workers were excluded. So.
And oftentimes you had to have in most states, you have to have a very strong and stable connection with the labor force in advance of being eligible for any unemployment insurance benefits. Well, so that's just a little bit of the story of what I call the economic side. The other side, which turned out to be a very powerful message, was, I guess I'd call it sociological side. And that was involving organization of the poor. community action, voting rights, whole set of rights of individuals and of low-income communities and centers and occupations and so on. That it was a group effort. It was based on an idea that poverty is due to weakness in groups. And if you could change the procedures and the processes of political and social nature, then you could people could work their way out of poverty. So this was captioned under this broad heading of community action, and that became a big part of the Economic Opportunity Act.
Right.
Now, the Poverty Institute came mostly out of this first thing, I think. That is the economic approach. But it had to live with, at least it had to try to understand and include the community action approach to things.
Was there an intellectual center to the sociological approach comparable to this? That I haven't.
Well, I think there have been a number. The Ford Foundation was, of course, the originator. Through its, what was it called?
Gray Areas Projects?
Yeah, Gray Areas. And Michael Sviridoff was the guru of that. And he continues even now as a center in himself.
Yeah, that's right. He has his own little thing.
Right. But it sprung up around the country in various ways, in various forms. For example, Organization of Welfare. What was the name? Wiley, was that the name?
Yeah, National Welfare Rights Organization. Yeah.
Mainly in Chicago, I think. And then this other man down there in Chicago.
Somebody like Alinsky or something.
Yeah, Saul Alinsky.
His biography, I should read.
Yeah, right. Well, and of course, the story of a lot of this is told in Pat Moynihan's little book about the maximum.
Yeah. That's right. I need to read that. That in years.
Yeah. Well, he focuses particularly on Harlem and some of the other early efforts. Well, these were not really easily reconciled. These two approaches. Well, social science, you might say, was kind of split apart into different having different views. Economists seem to fall easily into this first pattern. It wasn't hard for economists to understand and to show some enthusiasm for it about. And some sociologists, particularly demographers and other descriptive workers. And we had people, who had studied a lot about educational opportunities, which there's a class element involved in just thinking about poverty. And so there were a lot of things that were easy to reconcile among the social sciences, I think, political science and law, and agricultural economics and rural sociology.
You wrote a lot of different people like that.
A lot of those things happened really easy. But the thing that didn't work out very well in terms of experimentation or in terms of study was the community action side. Or the argument was that you had to get some kind of new political organization going. You had to break down the city machines, and you had to break down the school establishments. So it was a kind of very confrontational sort of thing. And I think there was even, open confrontation with the disciplines, with the established social science studies. The easy connection between the university and the power centers. And that very much, of course, shown in agriculture, where agricultural economics departments tended to work with the commercial farmers. They didn't really have anything to do with the
small farmers,
self-subsisting farmers,
the
tenants, or the migrant agricultural workers. And so on. So that kind of confrontation is reached out into the universities, and had meaning. It had some bite to it, but it was not a sort of thing that was easy to incorporate within the same institution. Like a research institute.
Right.
Now that continues even today. These very different procedures, very different types of analysis. And one notion is you have to be a participant observer. And that goes with this community action sort of thing. What does the intellectual do? What does Saul Alinsky do with these things? He's there. And he catches up whatever it is people are interested in almost, and carries the flag with him. And so there are some people now who believe still that that's the real way for social scientists or social problem solvers, or whatever you want to call us, should be.
I guess social workers and anthropologists and people like that would be more in that. What you would find there in terms of discipline differentiation.
That's possible. Although I think social work, for one, is strongly split on this. It also. Well, so I'm just sort of stumbling around here, trying to get a start with you.
Well, this is very helpful, actually.
It is interesting to recall that back in the 60s, social studies had drawn away from considering poverty as an issue or as a researchable subject almost. And a number of these groups that we referred to kind of had dropped it out of their viewpoint. And you could say that was true about social work. That many of the social workers that we trained at the University of Wisconsin, for example, never worked in a public agency for poor people. They worked with the rich. They worked with people who had problems, but they weren't necessarily poor. And the people who came to them very often weren't the poor. So that they were in a kind of, they were moving along with the psychiatrists into that sort of work, patient, individual clients with very intense problems, but people who had some, they were unlikely to be the real poor, and they were certainly not the big slum areas. They didn't locate in the slums, and so that you could argue, as Michael Harrington, I think, did, and other observers, that social workers were out of touch. They had become a privatized counselor. Well, that's harsh language, but so that you could say that was an observation that had some truth in it, and that applied to numerous groups, perhaps including educators even, and others, that we just kind of closed our eyes to some of these difficult problem areas in our country. And poverty was a word that somehow fit or aroused interest, or guilt, or something. I don't know what it,
or a combination of
all those, Going back a little further, of course, we had lots of things that didn't go under the word poverty, but a number of them were regional in nature, like depressed areas was a word and a concept. Belief that poverty was essentially a matter of pockets in the country. West Virginia, you got poverty in the Dust Bowl, and so on. You had these unique kinds of aberrations. There was some experience with these sorts of things. Some of it already by 1960. 64 had been shown to not work very well. One example, we set up this depressed area program. I say we, it was federal administration. And in the hands of Congress, this moved from being a program for just a few very depressed centers, rural and urban both. Do something for everybody. Every congressional district has a piece of that money. Well, that's how the politics works.
Yeah.
It's log rolling, or you trade this for that.
Right.
The same thing happened with Appalachian redistricting. New York State got a big chunk of that money. So it wasn't a poor state, and it wasn't even a very poor region, but it was Appalachian. So you get this kind of business where you start off something and you learn that Congress, President or England, they're going to all.
Well, that's another interesting thing that we're looking at is just how the political process helps or interferes with actually the way in which social sciences and people who are really trying to problem solvers are trying to deal with these problems. Because I think it has a lot of, even if you look at if you look at grassroots initiatives and the way those, by the time they get through Congress and then get back down to people, how distorted those are. And you're saying to some extent the same thing is true of the work economists and some of these advisors are doing it, actually putting these plans together.
Well,
that's good. That's important.
So I guess you could say that in the designing of the war on poverty, some of this experience was in the minds of people. And the word poverty stuck, I think, because that was a word that was rude enough. And you couldn't say, as we had done earlier, that the area was depressed, and therefore we had to do something about it. And then give all the money to the rich rather than the poor in those districts. I mean, that's the way a lot of agricultural programs work.
Right.
It's a great problem of Oklahoma Dust Bowl.
Right.
Give all the money to the rich guys.
Mississippi, that was.
Yeah. So anyway, this was very much in a lot of people. And the word poverty as a test goes to individual persons, not to areas. There's a big effort there to avoid the geographic. You didn't have to be a southern poor person.
Right.
You didn't have to be. You weren't going to pay out the money on the basis of poverty rates or something like that. You're going to pay it to the people, to the individual person, to the individual family, the individual. Well, that was the idea, but it doesn't always work that way. You get various kinds of programs that are called anti-poverty programs that have this old flavor to them, being regional or state by state, city by city, school district by school district, and so on. And community action, community by community. This area program idea comes back every once in a while with a great flourish. The most recent one is all this stuff about underclass, the urban underclass. That's area. Talking about an area is an underclass. Not the people in the underclass.
Right.
And that's geographic. And you count the number of people in each census tract, and then you say this is the target. The target is there because they got a bunch of lower class people. But not everybody in there is that. And so on. That's true. Enterprise zones and a lot of these things that go to the area.
Yeah.
So that's been a big struggle all along as to whether the concept and the unit that you're looking at as a target is a region or a state or a family or individual. And it's interesting that some social scientists are trained in one direction, some in others. And I think many times, let's say city planners or urban problems people, they tend to think in semi-political regions. It's a process, and the process has its unit. And I can understand that. Gives you a very different twist on it.
Where economists are much more interested in individual behavior, or some. I mean, they're both interested in both things.
Yeah, I think economics goes back to its founding to Adam Smith, the individualist behavior. And and how far they can go in solving their own problems with a free market setting. And so what Adam Smith saw as progress was breaking down a lot of these little barriers, walls around cities, and guilds around occupation, and all the security blankets or something like that. So you get rid of those, have just one big nation as a free market, or even better, a world.
A world, yeah.
That's where the individual can roam freely. Well, that's a pretty radical, still a very radical kind of look at the world. But that's sort of where economists start. So you get this, I suppose, very, very profound kind of argument that goes on about causes what and what remedies will work for what. Sometimes I think that sociologists are not in that same frame.
More in terms of groups, or
they think more along the lines of how did we get these groups? Yeah, how did we get these classes? And then what power do these classes have? And they generally find that there is a great stability in society, that there's some function, a functional reality here that you have to live with. You're never going to change it. And so when they come up against the education opportunity question, they'll show you that the children from non-educated parents are unlikely to go to school or to go to college or whatever it's at. And that's just reality. And you say, well, as I've done sometimes, ask these people who are close colleagues here, Bill Sewell and so on, how could you change that? So you break the families up, take the kids away, or some. But they haven't really seriously thought about it. That's not their business. They show this profound causal connection between education of mother or whatever it is, education of children and their grandchildren. So they like to study all that endlessly. And so when we meet in the institute about, well, what are you going to do? Well, if you got $100 billion, what are you going to do with spending it? I don't like to think that way. So they aren't really trained to be advisors to an action program. Now you could say economists aren't either, in a way. I mean, a lot of laissez-faire trained economists, their main occupation is showing most government programs can't work. They're counterproductive. So who is the right kind? Political scientists are often only interested in these governmental processes. Give people the right to vote. Then they'll or get them into a new redistricting or something. Move things from the state to the federal level, or from the federal down to the local level, or revise the local level. Those are political kinds of
move things around.
Change the process. Well, they may never study whether it actually changes the poverty incidence in the country. They're just interested in seeing if you can you change the process. And will it be popular? Will it work? Will it have surviving power? So political scientists have one kind of view, and sociologists quite a different one. And economists. But in general, it seems economists have been more successful in getting audience with the federal government. About local and state so much, but the federal government, both with Republicans and Democrats. But a great deal. I have argued that what the main significance of the war on poverty was that it moved responsibility to the federal level for a lot of programs that had been either local or state responsibilities. The main thing that Johnson did was say this is a national problem, and we have to deal with it nationally. You can't deal with it any other way, or exclusively.
Good or bad, you think?
Well, that's a big
still a big question.
Yeah, it depends on how strong it can. Of course, the man who died last month, Friedrich von Hayek, with this road to serfdom.
Yeah.
He thought this war on poverty was clearly a part of the road to serfdom. National centralize, make a bigger and bigger central government all the time. It's going to lead to. And again, as you may remember, what von Hayek said was that these problems have ways of growing, and they fail. And you get corruption. And you get all sorts of bad things. Then that means you have to have a stronger central government. And you finally get the tougher guys run it, the stronger program. And these tougher guys take you all the way to Hitler or something. Well, that's one evaluation you can say. What this was just part of a long process of centralizing power in not only the national government, but in government. And that meant less room for free choices of individuals or groups, private groups. So you get that kind of well, I was going to say, you said, is that a good thing? You're going to go nationally. One of the things that is involved in this is seeing, if you see the problem nationally, you think of different kinds of remedies. I mean, if you look at West Virginia Gully, a single one, what can you do for that? Well, not clear. You got too many options that move a lot. If you think nationally, you say, well, we take these people out of here and move them to Detroit. Well, so you at least start to think of some different things.
Yeah.
I remember when Michael Harrington was here talking about one of his last times after he'd written that book. He was complaining about all the depression in New England, where the shoe industry and the textile industry are all moving out to Carolina and to Georgia. And he thought that was always terrible. And aren't you concerned about all these? Aren't you interested in all these good jobs, or relatively good jobs, suddenly in the South? A lot of people there were probably poor. Now they're not poor because of this movement. Well, that was a little hard for him to answer. But anyway, it was partly that he was still thinking in these area terms.
Yeah.
And if you think in national terms, some of these things aren't quite the same. So I guess I thought in general that this was progress, and I guess I still had perhaps more confidence then than I do now in what the federal government can do, and how it would stick to a purpose and so on. Well, so we saw in talking about these early poverty efforts that a lot of it would involve national standards, national minimums for health and education, for social welfare programs, with cash benefits and other benefits. There would be, you establish a national minimum. That was, and I guess I remember arguing that this was the main difference between poverty in the United States and poverty, say, in England or in France or in Sweden. In those countries, for a long time, many of these programs were the responsibility of the central government. And they don't know anything about this, of having depressed schools. I mean, low budget schools in France are all the same. National schools, centralized, it's true. But at least they've solved this national minimum problem. And the same thing is true in Sweden. But that's partly just a matter of structure, just a matter of So, if you could say that this was where economists got talking about political science, the problems, but it was a review and in the Michael Harrington sort of view of saying that we had turned our minds away from this issue. We thought that we solved a lot in the New Deal, but we had some things we missed, and these things may have required a new and stronger impetus with the federal government to establish this set of minimums.
Was that one of the? It seems to me that was one of the roles or one of the jobs that social scientists in a particular place like the Institute played was helping to determine what these national standards were, how they maybe how they should be adjusted from time to time, how they and there were some regional adjustments made, which is a notion that comes out of the 30s too, but it's applied less, I think, in the 60s because there is more of a national labor market, and we've kind of gotten away from this, from some of the divisions of the 30s. So is that? Do you think that's true? I mean, that's one of the roles.
Well, we have people studying things like legal services, lawyers. Some of the best people we had in the institute were law school faculty, working on educational opportunities, various state and federal court cases, and people working on the 14th Amendment as it applies to AFDC, all kinds of interesting cases and interesting property law issues and developments. We've had relatively little going on in the Institute, but I think that probably the poverty thinking had something to do with movements in national goals in health, national minimums in health. It's been a long time coming. It's a long, slow direction.
Well, the Institute became one of the really central places for doing a lot of, where a lot of this thinking was going on, seems to me.
I think that'd be the best argument. That's a strong overstatement, perhaps. Because we never had true believers from all sides here. There were strong views that we didn't represent. We didn't hear. We didn't because they didn't come here. Saul Alinsky wasn't about to come here and spend a year or something. We did, however, occasionally have people from Sweden here and talking about their point. They thought we were a pretty dumb bunch of people. Because they'd solved all these problems. And we had people from different disciplines, as I mentioned. We didn't go to great lengths to make sure that we had every group represented. We've had relatively little about housing, relatively little about health, stuff, but more in some other in education. Lots about training and retraining, and then of course we got into the cash benefit stuff, and that led us off into this negative income tax. And that was that became the biggest half or biggest 3/4, I guess, of the Institute time and effort.
And that's really the logical.
68.
That's the logical extension or kind of working out of this economic argument. What the poor is one of my colleagues at Duke says what the poor need is money, not a lot of social programs. You can find some ways to do that, then you can solve. They can figure out how to solve their own problems.
Well,
perhaps.
Prediction. Proposition that got proved in this proof. Well, so the history of the Institute has to give a large attention to that. 68 or 67 to at least 1973. That became the obsession of this place. We were the center of that, in a way, the academic center of that effort. And that was a learning experience in many ways. One thing, it was a learning experience with interdisciplinary efforts. We did effectively combine, had a really growing concern involving lawyers, sociologists, psychologists, education experts, and so on, and tax experts, and so on. And that was a high point in lots of ways for me and other people I know. I worked on the tax side particularly, and we had a great tax lawyer here, that property law expert, Joel Handler, and Marmer from political science. Done a lot. So that we had an unusual collection of people, and we had great econometricians, consultants like Jim Tobin, Joe Beckman, and Jim Morgan. So it was really first class and groundbreaking sort of experience.
Yeah.
I never got anywhere in a sense. I mean, the political effort was a colossal failure. And on the other hand, you can say that we got a lot of small negative income taxes adopted somehow or other, like the food stamp program, earned income tax credit.
Yeah, there are lots and bits of pieces.
If you add those up, you
yeah.
And most of them, many of them are federal government programs,
right,
bypassing the states.
Right.
And so they feed a lot of money to the very lowest income areas as well as the lowest. So that was part of the story of the Institute, and involved discipline and relationships to one another in different ways at different times. But there's some things that we never got around to, not yet anyway. In 25 years, things haven't moved very far. We thought at various times of changing the name or changing the mission of the Institute, but we always get restrained on that. Some people say we haven't done enough about race, haven't done enough about the problem of racial discrimination and racial separation. We thought sometimes about especially studying women's problems. I mean, moving that direction, or moving to some broader title that would involve a broader range of problems. Social problems more broadly. Just be a social problem. Well, I think we're not about to do that. I say we. I'm no longer really involved, but as an observer, my sense that it is.
Thing that I have started to observe is, I think a couple people have told me this too, is that one impact that this had, or a place like this, and just the whole kind of all the things that are going on in social sciences in the 60s, is a lot of that the study of poverty and the causes of poverty were really the kind of central concern for, say, graduate students and a lot of economists in the 60s. If you go back and look at graduate students who were trained in economics in the 60s, whatever they ended up doing or whatever their particular fields were, a lot of them were very much focused on dealing with these very specific problems that you're talking about. I mean, it was the thing. It was that everybody was putting their energy and their intellect into. I bet was that true here too?
Yes, it was. And it's interesting that it wasn't just the left wingers there.
No.
A lot of these were really
very straight neoclassical.
Right. It was a chance to use their microeconomic theory. And their econometric skills.
Right.
And there were big databases around. And so a lot of people came in without any great social mission. This was just a problem and a way of analysis that caught their attention. And their professors would say, sure, you can do this. And some things kind of invaded, some ideas sort of invaded the profession. Like I remember looking one time here, the negative income tax was at its height of popularity, that we have various fields within economics. And in about 4 fields, they had preliminary exam questions for the PhD. Prelim questions in all 4 of those fields were on the negative income tax.
Is that right?
So it was microeconomics, public finance, labor economics, econometrics.
Oh, that's interesting.
So if you learned a lot about the negative income tax, you were in good shape.
Right.
So that was kind of a joke about this, but it represented something in the way of an in thing, as you say, an in approach to something, or some way of looking at social problems or individual behavior in response to a problem.
I guess some people went off in different directions with that. And some did become very kind of committed, socially and politically, and others more just professionally, but it's a very dynamic period, I think, in the history of the economics profession or in social sciences in this country.
Yeah, to some extent it was interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
A lot of these private think tanks, these consultant for money groups like associates for Mathematica.
Right.
A lot of our students just help fill up those places out there.
Yeah.
And like a lot of those think tanks will take a problem of any sort, on international trade or on racial discrimination or on rights or they're hired guns.
Yeah.
But they got some of these people got their start way often with this Poverty Institute group or this. There is a big fraternity of people who start at one place or another and still talk about these. So there are other centers. I mean, Wisconsin is by no means unique anymore. Like there's this new group at Harvard inside the Kennedy School, what's called Social Problems Center or something, with special funding. And there's a group in Michigan. They don't have, none of them call themselves Poverty Institute, but they're very close.
Focus on things, kind of stuff.
The Urban Institute has sort of overlap with people here and Brookings to a certain extent.
What urban problems were, I know, the focus of most of the work that was done here, and most of the work that people were doing on poverty, particularly after, say, 65 or so. I mean, initially, there was a lot of interest in Appalachia and the Delta, the problems of the South. But quickly, the urban problems became really foremost in people's mind. But what did you think about say the rural South? I'm just interested if it was just a matter of spillover in terms of the way this research and thinking affected anti-poverty programs in the South, or whether there was some specific thought. Well, our city problems are the result of our failure to deal with particularly the problems of race and poverty in the South. Is there any thinking about that, or?
Yeah, a lot of thinking, I would say. The tradition of concern about race and about poverty and about national development has to confront this issue of regional disparities, and takes you right back to century. So that was there all the time, and I think you could say that having a Southerner in the White House had something to do with all this. One of the things, I'm sorry to stumble around.
That's all right. No, you're doing. This is fine. This is exactly what I'm helping a lot.
In the Kennedy period, there was a brief, roughly a year's time when it was just talked back and forth about what would be the campaign slogans or goals statement in the campaign for re-election in '64. Poverty was put forward along with the argument that you couldn't say we're going to do things for black people. And you couldn't say we're going to do it for the black slums in Chicago or for the black underclass in the Delta. But you could reach these people by a national program without the color going with it. Well, that touched something somewhere. Responsive to what?
Exactly.
No. Kennedy was all the time he was there, that 3 years in the White House, being besieged by complaints that he wasn't moving on housing, he wasn't moving on rights to vote, he wasn't doing a lot of things, and he always had his reasons. and the arguments went.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a whole group of his advisors and people around him and groups that he heard from
Mm-hmm.
that started to do something else. And he couldn't just give tax cuts to the rich.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't just do the various things that he was doing. And actually, he was a very, very cautious guy.
Yeah, yeah.
So when Johnson came in, he didn't have that same set of cautions, and he had on the other hand a very real commitment to go ahead from the New Deal to the next stages, and he thought this kind of stuff was somewhere there. With the things that Kennedy had just kind of tiptoed around with, like federal aid education, and he did, of course. And that was all part of the same business of overriding the region. And I guess I had thought you could only get attention to a goal like that for some limited period of time. There are other things that come along, and that was foreseeable. I didn't know what those things would be, but we'd had big discussions in the executive office building, executive offices, I guess it's called, about these what kind of problems were there that people were interested in and concerned about. One of them was what was at that time called conservation. That's environment problems. Another one was consumer safety, drugs and medicinal drugs and food and automobile tires, all sorts of. Those were things that you sensed there was some great national feeling about. And there could be other things. And certainly since then, we've had a number of these things that are rivalrous, at least, with property. Again, this is where there's a great surge of interest. I think the environment's the best example.
Yeah.
This catches the interest of all kinds of people, old and young and conservative and liberal and so on, all across the way. And that kind of overrides race or religion or education or something. As problems with goals attached.
Right.
So I guess I thought that we would, by 1980 at least, we would have worn this out. And some other president would come along and incorporate maybe the poverty idea along with something else. And that you would have, in that way, as we've had in the past, a movement around a set of related problems. But I never really believed at all that we would have an institute that would last 25 years. Under different presidents and different administrations, different Congresses and so on, and that we would still think of poverty as a big problem. That was optimistic.
Yeah. Well, in those days, that was pretty. I mean, that's the way people were thinking.
Well, it wasn't hard to catch an optimistic, good wave sort of ride, I would say. It looks ridiculous in retrospect how it could be so wrong. So that's just kind of a footnote to what we've been doing earlier about what kind of thought there was involved and what kind of controversy, perhaps. Other people who were thinking about these things. The Poverty Institute has held several 10-year retrospectives. And there's one coming up in May here. There was one at Williamsburg.
Yeah, I think that.
And one at Wingspread in.
The Wingspread is. I've got a copy of the papers of the book.
Now those are of some interest.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're broad enough for what you're reaching. But they do confront the question: what works, what doesn't work, what failed, what kinds of.
Well, they're helpful in giving me some answers to some particular questions and stuff.
And some of the authors of those retrospectives are very likely people for you to think about. On the Institute side of things, some of the best thinkers and liveliest and most interesting developers at this moment are researchers of the Institute. And one I would put right at the top of the list for you to think about is Sheldon Danziger, who's now at Michigan.
Oh, okay.
he's the organizer of this 25th.
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
Coming 25th, and that's meant to be. Well, I don't know. Did you say you had that material about it?
No, I don't.
You could pick it up downstairs.
Oh, okay.
But it's called Poverty and Public Policy, May 20. Updated agenda. What do we know? What should we do?
Mm-hmm.
We have a sociologist as director now,
Mm-hmm.
Hauser,
Mm-hmm.
and these are. Yeah, that's a list of names over here, Sheldon.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I'll get a copy of that when I go down, because that
All
one.
right, if you're going to be down
Yeah.
the way I can give you this.
I should be able to get one downstairs
Yes,
when
I think so.
Yeah.
The woman sort of in charge of all the arrangements and so on is Betty Evans.
Yeah, she's who I'm going to talk to get some material.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
She's a great source.
Yeah.
Resource. Anyway, this, I think, sort of indicates that there is a continuing community of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
There is a National Advisory Council that's great help for the Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And they include people like Christopher Jenks, and he has a new book just out.
Yeah, I just got it. My student's reading it right now.
Alfred Kahn is on that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we got any Southerners on there.
That's what I was looking. I don't see any so far.
Got some right-wingers. Southern roots.
I don't know. This guy used to be at Duke.
Uh-huh.
People who work on these things.
Yeah, and it is interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
Like Franklin Wilson from Chicago.
All right. Roger Wilkins writes a lot about the South.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, well, what's he a professor of?
Oh, kind of history, I think.
History.
I think that's what he
Yeah, we've always had some historians on this board.
Yeah.
Patterson, Jim Patterson from Brown is one, and I know a guy you probably don't know, may know, a historian who was at Virginia. He left without tenure, and he went to the Kennedy Library in Boston. He wrote the best little history, I think, of the roots of the poverty program in the Johnson. And it was in the American Historical Review as an article.
Oh, yeah, I've got that. I can't remember what the guy's name is either. I know. I've read that.
He was going to do a full-scale history of the war on poverty, or it's up to some period.
But the guy who...
but I think he's very good.
Yeah, they're doing the people who did Eyes on the Prize are doing a three-part series on the war on poverty.
Television.
Yeah, television series.
I attended a meeting about that several years ago. I was sort of shocked by the way they go about doing it.
Yeah.
They just want to know where the confrontations were.
Yeah.
I mean, they got footage.
Yeah, right.
So they kept talking about the film archive, and I don't know what they were doing. that's all these little TV stations everywhere on the country.
Right.
Had filmed wherever there was demonstrations or lock-ins or lockouts But so I thought that was a curious kind of and it's very much glittering as the black poor, I think.
Yeah.
That was their emphasis.
Yeah. I haven't
community action was
there. That's probably what they'll focus on.
Yeah. I found a hard time. I had a hard time that today.
Yeah. I've talked to them a little bit, and I want to go up and spend a little bit more time with them. But I mean, I don't want to. I'm really trying to not to do that with what we're doing. I mean, I want all of those pieces there, but what one of the things we're trying to do is develop some little bit bigger picture of it, because I don't think that. I think unless we do that, unless we try to deal with this as kind of intellectual historians, as social historians, political historians, I don't think that we're going to have much to say about how, what we've learned, where we should be going, where, what new programs, what new kind of research we need to do, to kind of to begin at least thinking about how we might need to rethink some of these problems, reconceptualize them, develop some new strategies.
A lot of historical, intellectual history stuff about black leaders who've been around. Not just Martin Luther King, but
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X.
Yeah.
And so on.
Yeah.
Reconsidering it.
Yeah. It's an interesting period. I think that there's going to be. I think in the historical profession that there's that the kind of re-understanding of the post-war period is going to be a kind of a hot emphasis, and an important one, because I think that I don't think we understand in the ways that we need to do what has happened, and I think the end of the Cold War is really is going to force us now. We don't have that kind of easy dichotomy that we used to have of thinking about the world, of thinking about the nation. We're going to have to we're going to have to rethink what we've been up to. I think that'll be.
I thought of this the other day when I was reading about this most recent stuff about the FBI. I guess it's in the Atlantic Monthly this time. Watergate. And what was Watergate really about? And the allegation by the author sounds like it was at the Washington Post. The whole thing had to do with a conflict between the FBI, or between the FBI and the presidents, whoever they were. They had reached the end of some point, and their method, when the president was not doing what they wanted him to do, was to go to the press, and that's where Deep Throat was from. He was from the FBI, and this was their squawk for the president. Well, I mean, but so we've broken open all those records, presumably. I mean, and a lot of this stuff involves things like the FBI and the CIA. And what did we learn out of all that? So there's some kind of new realm of evidence for historians.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just like in Russia, the opening up all the documents. I guess. Do you know Stan Cutler from here?
I know who he is, but
I think he's working on a book.
Yeah.
That's been one of his interests all along.
Yeah, he's been very important in getting that kind of stuff open. Yeah, a couple friends of mine have been to the Soviet historians have been over there, and they just can't. Things 2 years ago they could. They might get one little document after a week of hounding it. Now they just go in and boxes and boxes. They're microfilming this stuff so fast.
Do you know this sort of radical group of historians? I think, but the leader is this Theda Skocpol.
I know who she is. Yeah, Harvard. She's a sociologist.
Well, she's done a lot of historical kinds of
stuff
about the Social Security program. One of the best things I remember that she wrote was about the Civil War pension program, which is a remarkable story. And so these are very valuable things that historians can do, I think. To go back and apply some of the methodology, if you will, or the present controversies with relating them to much earlier time. And, so that we are, I think, in at least intellectually, we're in a different mood. As the war on poverty represented a different mood. It was a different kind of idea of what government might do. Or what some kind of a new effort on the part of some class of people, intellectuals or whatever they were, leaders in the private sector as well as in the public. well, so there is. I guess I hadn't sensed that that the poverty line is going to be so interesting. Others like institutions like the FBI. What do we do without an FBI? What do we do with a different method of reporting on intelligence matters? What do we do about savings and loan associations? All kinds of problems.
Yeah.
We haven't thought much. We haven't had real arguments.
Right. Well, the military is going to be a big one. I mean, we haven't even
sure.
started
Right.
to conceptualize what a defense, defense program is going to look like in this kind of new world. What kind of money we're going to spend on it. We're a ways from that, I think.
I have a sort of little hobby of things that have to do with, I guess I think of them as government failures. We talk a lot about market failures, like government failures. And one I think of as an example, and I think there are other examples, to take some failures and study them. Why did they happen? One has to do with this whole business of the Social Security Trust Fund. One glorious failure, one of the glorious failures had to do with the predictions following the 1978 amendments. It had to do with recalculating benefits for people, and an error was made in the formula. And we discovered the error. It took 6 years for Congress to correct the error, and that meant a transfer, an unwanted, unplanned transfer to one particular group, an age group of retired people. Well, I thought that some student could take that and study who made the error. It's like a error with a submarine, or developing a submarine, or the stealth bomber, or something. It's an absolute error. Who was responsible for that, and why did it take so long to correct it? That's one. The other one also has to do with the Social Security Trust Fund, and I regard this as a kind of government failure. We've adopted a position on the trust fund. It's supposed to grow until 2050 or 2030, maybe it is 2038. Then we draw down. We're going to build it to $12 trillion, which is a couple of times the present GNP. It's an enormous program. And the error, the error I want somebody to work on is that was never debated. There's no debate in either floor of the Congress, either house of the Congress. There's no presidential argument. There's nobody telling the public that that's what we're going to do. It just emerges gradually. Now, Moynihan and some other people once in a while say something about what we should do with that. Moynihan himself was involved in this dark of night meeting with Senator Dole and some other people who were members of the commission, the Greenspan Commission, in 1883. And I regard that as a great government failure. But as I understand it, they reached an agreement to start with that the Greenspan Commission was not going to concern itself with the size of the trust fund. They agreed to accept whatever that was beyond them. So who was it up to? It's up to some other. And it's avoided. There's not been a real public debate of a responsible sort of political way of doing things. So I've urged a couple of students to say, there's a great story for an economist or somebody. Now, one book is written about the whole Greenspan Commission, and that's by a guy named Light. But he closes it off and doesn't touch that. The argument, the whole thing was over. And it hadn't been mentioned, so he doesn't mention it. Well, that's a failure or something on his part. But I can see why he might have just said, well, I have gone far enough with the story. well, somebody could break open those records
Yeah.
of the Greenspan Commission, I think, or the meetings of the House Ways and Means Committee, or
Yeah. Talk to people, do
somewhere, and talk to people.
Yeah.
What to do.
That's an interesting way of teaching.
Well, I
teaching
think so.
is
Yeah.
yeah,
Right,
of
yeah,
looking
yeah,
at those
right,
things that
yeah,
didn't
right,
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that's like in this project that we're doing. That there are a couple cases where we very specifically have targeted individuals and organizations who had a great idea that just went bust.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right.
And trying to look at whether it was where the failure came from. What was was it ill conceived? Was it
Right.
poor leadership?
Yeah.
Misunderstanding of kind of political realities, or what was it that didn't make this work the way it should have? It's a good way to teach. A good way to learn.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, and of course, maybe it affects students to study failures the wrong way. But
I think you actually learn more about history and about affecting change by looking at things, because when you look at successes, you think they had to happen.
Yeah,
you
right,
think that
right.
they were kind of preconceived, where you don't realize all the contingencies.
Right.
And when you look at failure, you realize, God, if that one little thing had been just changed just a little bit, this whole thing would have worked.
Like studying the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
That is a great failure.
Yeah.
At least maybe someday we'll think of it as such a great failure. But
Well, let me go. Well, I really appreciated talking to you. This is